Hey guys, welcome to the 62 attribute challenge. So this is going to be the explanation video to just give you some information about the challenge and some of the repercussions of making the challenge criteria as it is, and some strategies and ideas that I come up throughout the course of this challenge that you'll see in the attempt videos. So let's go ahead and start a new game here. So the first part of the challenge is that we need to play on Classic. Pretty standard. If you die, challenge is over. Gotta have some sort of fail condition, right? So Classic, you die, it's over. The second part of the challenge is that we need to play a mutated human. This is more important in the context of the other rules of the challenge, but essentially it makes the game a bit harder, especially at the early game. So we're going to pick any calling for right now. The third part of the challenge is that we cannot choose any mutations. We can spend 0 mutation points. So we can't even choose anything like a Chimera or Esper to shape the way our mutations come to us, or unstable genome, nothing like that. We can spend 0 points, so we just leave this totally blank and hit next. The last part of the challenge is that we are not allowed to spend any of these attribute points. So all of our stats are going to be at 10, except for the one stat that is boosted based on our calling. And this is where the name of the challenge gets its name, because your attribute total is going to be 62. So 62 attribute challenge. So we got the starting requirements out of the way, but how do you win the challenge? What is the criteria for beating the challenge? There are 2 main categories of criteria in order to consider this challenge won. The first criteria is that we need to beat the main story. So at the time of recording, this just gets you past the first ascension of the Tomb of the Eaters. You get resurrected and complete that part of the quest. That's as far as the quest line goes. That is the first flag to clear to complete the challenge. The second category is I need to kill at least one of the following enemies that I'm going to list out. Each of the enemies I've chosen for a particular reason, mostly because they have killed me in one of my runs, or they have the potential to kill me even when I get like a really insane powerful run. Essentially, I consider being able to kill all of these enemies enough evidence to say, okay, nothing else can really kill me in this game. I've won it. So the first enemy is the Chrome Pyramid. If you know anything about the Chrome Pyramid, it is kind of the be-all, end-all of enemies to kill. I actually find that once you know how to deal with it, it is less threatening than some of the other enemies on this list. But it's on there because it's the Chrome Pyramid. I mean, you gotta kill one of those. Second enemy is the Galgal. So this enemy, very dangerous because of the insane quickness that it has. You can just get stun locked and killed pretty easily. So need some way of dealing with that. The second 2 are the Krakens, the Salt Kraken and the Star Kraken. Both of those have a way to instantly kill you, and unlike some other ways of instant death, like the Lithofex and the Stony Gaze, there's no getting around this. If you're caught in the consumption path of either one of these, you are instantly dead, and they can try and consume the tile in front of them pretty often, really as much as they want. In addition, the Star Kraken in particular is extra dangerous because it can fight even better than the Salt Kraken in melee without its special consume ability. So very, very dangerous enemies. Next, we have Oboroqoru, the Ape God. Oboroqoru is really, really deadly because of the cudgel skills that he has. So he's got cudgel skills and he's got multiple arms, and he'll just hit you many, many times and stun you and daze you, and he's very, very dangerous. He also does tons of damage, tons of strength, super deadly enemy. So gotta kill him. Then the last enemy well, really sequence of enemies to kill, are all of the cherubim that are in the Tomb of Eaters. So in each Sultan tomb, there are a number of cherubim. I have to kill specifically the cherubim that are in the Sultan tombs. I cannot just find cherubim out in the wild and consider that one. I have to clear out the Tomb of the Eaters Sultan chambers. Gotta kill all of them. So those are the rules. Pretty simple. But let's talk about some of the repercussions of that rule set. So the first one is that we can't choose any mutations, right? Obviously, we can't spend any mutation points, so we don't get to choose what mutations that we get. So we have to rely entirely on buying mutations, which means that, especially at the start, our mutation points from level up don't actually do anything. We have to get 4 mutation points for it to even start doing something. It also means that the first mutation that we get comes at level 4 or level 5. And that's also the level that we get a rapid advancement for a physical mutation. So if we don't have a physical mutation, then the rapid advancement just doesn't do anything. There are some times that we only get the choice of mental mutation, so that rapid advancement not going to do anything, right? And our level ups are not much help throughout most of the challenge. They slowly build up over time to become useful, but for example, the first few level ups, you're getting 50 skill points and 1 HP. That's not very useful, right? So a lot of level ups just aren't impactful whatsoever. It's really those level up milestones where you get those attribute changes and the mutation point thresholds where you get your next 4 mutation points to buy a new mutation that your level ups actually start to do something. The other thing about choosing our attributes being so low means that we can't really get any skills throughout most of the run. There is an attribute requirement for every single skill. Some are much lower, some we can afford, but most of them require at least 15 and above in the skill. So if it's a skill that we're not investing in heavily, then it's going to be a long time before we actually get the skill requirements to buy the skill, or the attribute requirements to buy the skill. So it's a little tougher than just being weak at the start. So let's go over some strategies that I've came up with to start us off. So the first strategy is to use Apostle. The strategy with Apostle is proselytize. That's really the whole strategy. There's not much else to it besides that. Just because Intimidate is not reliable, Ego is not an amazing skill to have or an amazing attribute to have boosted. It's just not very useful until you get a plus to your Ego, because then you can start scaling off your mental mutations. But there's not even any guarantee that you'll get any mental mutations. So Ego is not quite as useful as the other options that we have. It's really just proselytize. That's our whole thing. Archonaut I played around with a little bit. The agility that he gets is quite useful, as there are a lot of very useful agility-based skills. But the other reason to pick Archonaut is the tinkering skill that he starts off with. So you identify artifacts much more reliably. With your terrible intelligence, you tend to break most artifacts that you get. Perhaps the most interesting about Archonaut is that he gets both acrobatics and spry, 2 skills that require something like 17 agility just to get. So starting out with those are very useful to increase your DV. DV isn't as reliable, I found, in this challenge, just because your agility is so low for so long. But it is eventually important. Greybeard I've never picked. The -1 to strength was a huge factor for me. Your inventory is already terrible with 10 strength. Taking a -1 to that is too crippling. Gunslinger is actually pretty useful. Once again, kind of like Apostle, where Gunslinger only does really one thing. Or Apostle only really does one thing. Gunslinger also does one thing. The reason to pick him is the pistols and the ammo. That's really the only reason. These skills are not super useful in the early game. Agility's good, but yeah, you're not picking Gunslinger for the skills. You're picking him for his starting equipment, which is pretty unique because he's the only calling that you would really choose just for the starting equipment. Marauder is just bad. You do not want to be in melee, so the axe skills are not super useful, and dismember skills not super useful, and charge even worse. You want to be away from the enemies, not right up in their face. So Marauder is actively awful. Pilgrim, similar. These skills just aren't very useful. Wayfaring is the best skill in there, but willpower is not as important as some of the other skills like toughness and agility. Really the only benefit of Pilgrim is that wayfaring skill. That's really it. Nomad is quite good. And Nomad is good primarily for the skills that he gets. So wayfaring, probably the most important skill to not get lost all the time. Harvestry is useful because you can harvest plants. It's quite helpful to get witchwood bark, because it's a very, very reliable source of healing, especially early on. So having harvestry means that you can just get essentially as much as you want, or as much as you really need. And weathered is also a very good skill. It's not as useful at the start, but having extra flame and cold resist is always super, super helpful. The wilderness lore, don't really care about. The Isakari tribe rep, don't really care about. Recycling suit is good just because of the armor bonus that it gives, and it has no DV penalty. So it's actually really good armor, especially at the start here. And then toughness. Toughness is super important so that you don't die. It's one of the attributes that I tend to prioritize the most alongside agility. Toughness is very, very important. For Scholar, the extra intelligence is nice because it gets you to those intelligence-based skills faster. Scholar does start off with quite a few skills, but most of these are not that useful. So for example, Tinkering you can get for free from the Barathromites. For rep, First Aid you can get for free from the Cult of the Coiled Lamb in the 6-day Stilt. Heal is nice, although I don't really use it too much, especially with our HP being so low. A percentage-based heal does not do a whole lot for us. Tactics is 50 skill points, so not a big loss to have that, and you can just buy it right at the start. Customs and Folklore is a nice skill, but it doesn't come into play that often. Really, the only threshold that you're going to break with Customs and Folklore are some Troll rep and the Consortium of Phyta. You can get Snake Oiler through essentially one secret and a water ritual. That's the only benefit to Customs and Folklore. Not super impactful. But Harvestry, as we talked about before, is useful. And if you get lucky on the wilderness lore, that can be useful as well. But the main reason to take Scholar is the intelligence. And if that's all you're taking Scholar for, you might as well just take Tinker, just because Tinker gets better skills and also starts with the intelligence. Tinker 1 allows you to have access to a pretty wide variety of mods. There are some more powerful mods that require Tinker 2, but you're probably not going to make it to Tinker 2 anyway. So starting with Tinker 1 really sets you up for success. And then also starting off with Disassemble is very, very nice, since you don't get that one from any factions. Repair is not as nice as some of the others because you can buy that from the Daughters of Exile in Ezra. Otherwise, Tinker is pretty solid if you're going for something more intelligence-based. Warden is not quite as good as some of the rest. It's the better strength alternative for sure. The Warden skills are pretty nice. Unfortunately, they are all combat related. And the bow and rifle and pistol are really the main draws to Warden at the start there. The only downside is that pistol, the requirements for that are low enough where you can buy it on your own. The requirements for long blade are low enough that you can buy them on your own. And the requirements for shield are low enough that you can buy them on your own. On top of that, you can actually buy the shield skill from the Warden's Ether at the 6-day stilt. So you don't even need to get shield through skill points. Shield Slam and bow and rifle are the only ones that are more useful. Our agility is so low, however, that bow and rifle isn't quite as good as it could have been. Now, the real reason why you take Warden is for the Warden rep. 300 reputation is actually quite a bit. This means that the Warden relies on you doing a Joppa start, as you want that extra reputation so that you can water ritual and get the Warden there on your side, because that Warden is an absolute beast. Next we have the Water Merchant. Just ignore the Water Merchant. You start off with money, but whatever equipment that you're going to find early on is just not going to keep you alive, really, in comparison to some of the other callings that you get. And Snake Oiler is a very easy skill to get from the Consortium of Phaida. All you need are 2 secrets or 1 secret if you're Apostle or Scholar, and you have Snake Oiler. So not really any real reason to take it. And then the Ego, not a great attribute. And then finally we have the Watervine Farmer. So the Watervine Farmer is pretty unique. It's in a unique place. It gets toughness, which is super good. Toughness is always a great attribute to have. But the skills that it gets are pretty interesting. So Cooking and Gathering is definitely nice to get because you want this skill before Gritgate to reliably get through it. You can get it from the villagers of Kakyuka, but you have to travel through some jungle tiles in order to do that. So it can be risky sometimes, but Cooking and Gathering is a pretty important skill to get. Harvestry, as we've mentioned earlier, very useful skill. And Axe, not very useful. So all those taken into account, Watervine Farmer is maybe like a mid or lower tier pick. But what really pushes the Watervine Farmer up is the starting rep with the Villagers of Joppa. Because after just a few quests with them, you're able to get Mehmet as a follower. And Mehmet is going to be stronger than most things that you can proselytize or otherwise get as a follower around you. So the Watervine Farmer relies on you doing a Joppa start. If you're going to do a Joppa start, Watervine Farmer is one of the stronger options. So that's going over the callings. So let's go over the village starts to take care of those. So starting off with Joppa, it's got starting loot. It's got pretty easy starting quests, or reliably easy starting quests. It's a solid pick. And I do start off with Joppa for most of my earlier game runs. However, I do transition towards the randomly generated villages for one particular reason, which you guys will see in the runs. The Salt March village is just Joppa light. There's no reason to pick this village. Just pick Joppa instead. You get better stuff. The Salt Dunes teach Fasting Way, which is okay. It gives you starting rep with reptiles, which is insane. Very, very good. You definitely want Unshelled Reptile rep. The only downside is that it's in the salt dunes, and the salt dunes are incredibly dangerous. There have been multiple runs where I have just left the salt dunes, gotten lost on the first tile, gotten dropped onto dawn gliders, and just instantly killed. So, yeah, salt dunes are way too dangerous to start. They're very swingy. You get some good stuff, mostly that reptile rep, but I've found that it's probably not worth the risk. Then desert canyons. So the rep is not important. What is important is wayfaring. As we've established from the callings, wayfaring is a very, very important skill because getting lost is super annoying and it can be very, very deadly. And then finally, we've got the hills. So the hills aren't super interesting and they can be dangerous, but they are a way to get butchering, which is a skill that only the Marauder starts off with, and you don't want to pick Marauder because his other skills are just awful. So if you want butchering, then the hills are a good place to go. Otherwise, you tend to go through the Desert Canyon Village or through Joppa. Those have been the starting villages and starting setups that I've been using. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for the actual video runs where you get to see me put some of these strategies in action. Catch you later.